Whoa, I'm in the intro. So before this video gets underway, I do want to let you know that it was very important for me to record this video in one take. Now, I didn't want to cut it up. I didn't want to put together a perfectly crafted message. I just wanted to speak raw to you guys about how I feel about the state of the hobby and the state of retail as it sits right now with the new limits imposed, and just kind of riff and talk for about 20 minutes. So that's what this video is, just talking about the state of the hobby. I hope you enjoy it, but there was a very specific reason why I did it in just one take. What is going on, YouTube? Run Good Life coming at you with yet another video, and today I want to talk about something that is a very hot button subject in the hobby, and that of course is the state of retail trading cards. Now, if you are unaware, and I'm sure that you probably are, it is just incredibly tough to find retail trading cards. Even blasters of 2021 Topps Series 1, hard to find. You know, basketball and football, you just cannot find this stuff on the shelves. It does not stay on the shelves longer than a few hours. It usually just hits the shelf, then immediately goes into carts. You see this all the time on social media, just huge lines of collectors and flippers and whatever the case may be. Just let's say huge lines of people just waiting for a vendor to either restock or waiting for the vendor just to even show up. And we see these photos time and time again on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And, you know, if you are new to the hobby, it never used to be like this. Never, ever was like this. Retail was always seen as second tier to hobby. And so it was commonly expected that retail products like blasters, megas, nobody really even touched fat packs and things like that for the most part. You can actually go back to my video that I shot hunting for cards in like late 2019. And the shelves were just filled with stuff, including products like 2019 Topps Series 2, which was in November. So that product had been out for months. Chronicles basketball status. So there were a lot of retail products that just didn't get touched until 2019-20 Prism came along. But I want to backtrack. I want to talk about why retail has gotten so hot. But in order to do that, we have to start at the hobby level, because that's where all of this came from. Now, like I said, as early as a year ago, the preferred route, you know, if you are a hardcore collector, if you ripped a lot of product, you just went the hobby route. But with what we're seeing at the hobby level, it has created a trickle-down effect to retail, and thus making retail extremely valuable, way more valuable than the current price that you find it. You know, if you do manage to find retail, fat packs are usually about $6, cello packs are about $10, hanger boxes 15, blasters 20, and mega boxes anywhere from $40 to $50. There's some outliers there, but for the most part, that's your prices for retail. Now, the price of a hobby box, I think this is a good starting point. The price of a hobby box has typically, for a lower end product, you know, Topps Series 1, $75. Product like Prism Optic, $100, and that was as early as a couple years ago. You know, National Treasures, I remember a time when people thought paying $700 for a box of National Treasures basketball was crazy. And now the idea of it being under $1,000, under $2,000, seems crazy, because I believe National Treasures basketball 2019-20 sold for $4,000 on Panini's website, which is a huge jump over the previous year of $750. And so this is where one of the problems comes in. And this is the price of hobby products going up and the price of retail products staying the same. Now, this can't happen without either one being overpriced or one being undervalued. So what you're seeing, let's take a recent example with 2020 Optic Football. These were sold on Panini's website for, what, $750, which is a 7.5x increase over last year at $100. Even Optic Basketball last year was sold at $100. So a 7.5x increase. And this is just one example, right? Look at Donruss Basketball, which blowoutcards.com tried to claim was a $1,200 product at pre-order, which hopefully nobody bought in at that price. But it did create a ripple effect in the market, and we're going to talk about that as well. So with all of the prices of hobby products going up, you would think that retail would fall in line. You know, if a $100 hobby box last year is now $700, shouldn't that make a $20 blaster box like 140? 7x, same increase, right? Not quite. Everything at retail stayed the same. And so when you have these surging hobby prices, you're going to have singles go up in value as well. And when singles go up in value, particularly like base cards, silver prisms, things that you can hit out of retail, because as everybody knows, hobby boxes generally produce the best parallels, the best, patch autos and things of that nature. But you can still hit some pretty good cards out of retail as well. Looking at like the Prism set, you can still hit silver prisms, and you can still hit base rookies. And really, that's the name of the game, in sets like Prism and Select, and which is now coming out at retail, by the way. But like sets like Optic, Mosaic, Prism, those sets are going to have all your base rookies. Also, with a set like Hoops, which just recently came out, you have the Slam inserts and other retail-only inserts, which came really hot out of the gate, but those Slam inserts are really something else. So with the price of retail not changing and the price of hobby just surging in value, it was bound to create an effect where retail is just inherently more valuable. And that's where the flipping comes in. That's where the hoarding comes in. That's where the every collector for themselves mentality comes in. And there's a few practices here that I don't feel bad about. One of those being, if you are a collector and you walk in on a restock and you haven't seen one in months, and what are you going to do? Are you going to, if there's no limits, are you just going to take a couple and hope that other collectors get it? Or are you just going to leave it there for a flipper? So there's a lot of like toxicity involved right now with retail as well. So I've talked about the price of hobby products. Now I want to talk about kind of a touchy subject, and that is the distributor wholesaler level, distributor to breaker allocation levels. A lot of people just don't know too much about this. So Panini does sell on their own website, but Panini uses distributors, and that's how product gets out to hobby shops. That's how it gets out to the big players, BlowoutCards.com, Dave & Adams, and Steel City Collectibles. Those are the top 3 online retailers, and it's how it gets out to breakers. Now, there is a thing in the hobby called allocation. And what allocation is how much product you are going to get at release date, right? And that's set by distributors. Now, distributors, with the hobby as hot as it is, distributors are going to get... distributors basically like run the show right now, right? They get to play God almost. They get to determine who gets what. I've heard a lot of my friends in the hobby who own their shops say, hey, I'm only getting 4 boxes of this product this year compared to last year when I could get as much of it as I want. And keep in mind, when we're talking allocation, we're talking like factory cost, we're talking prices that normal collectors never touch. To give you an example of this, I believe the factory cost of 2020 Optic Football was about $72 or so. And so the initial run of allocation, this is what, if factories that expect to pay, the first cost, because a distributor has to make money, around $80, $90 a box or so. So things have not changed at that level, really. I can't speak to everything that happens at the distribution level, but what I can say is I believe that there's some price fixing going on here, and I believe that certain players in the industry, particularly the Dave & Adams, the Steel City Collectibles, the Blowout Cards of the world, are still getting large allocations, as well as group breakers, the biggest players in town. In this level, it's basically the more you spend, the more you get. And, it makes sense to an extent, except when small, like mom and pop LCSs and LCSs trying to get off the ground can only get 1 or 2 boxes, then it's pretty problematic, especially when somebody like a bigger breaker may be getting 40 cases, 20 cases, whatever the case may be. Now, breakers, and I even believe Blowout, actually, I got into a tweet war with Blowout over the price of Don Russ basketball pre-sale, and they claimed that their allocation numbers are way down this year. And that could be the case. It's really hard to prove it without just seeing the hard facts, and no company is going to do that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is with distribution level, there's a lot of just shady stuff going on. It really just feels kind of like an old boys club, really. who do you know at this level? That's, how businesses and, business entities in the hobby are supposed to be able to get retail or hobby product, but they can't. And, especially if you are newer, if you are a newer breaker, I recently just signed up for all of my business licenses and trying to get that in order. For me, group breaking kind of just blew up. I never expected to be group breaking nearly as much as I am, but I've been enjoying it, and there's a demand for it, and people appreciate the way that I am able to present group breaks. So I thought it'd be a good idea to get set up as a business. And with that, like, I'm facing challenges that other of my friends in the hobby who, have LCSs or have been breaking longer than me, are dealing with. I talked to a couple people and they're like, yeah, I don't know why you're even applying to these distribution companies like GTS and Gulf Hobby, simply because you won't get allocation. It doesn't matter because you're too new. So it's a lot of who do you know at this level, right? So with all of these problems that exist at the hobby level, these are just going to trickle down to retail. So now I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about limits at retail stores. And so with limits, we're starting to see stores like Target and Walmart be proactive and actually enforce these limits and actually set limits, which is great, right? It's great because for the longest time, it was just the first person to walk in on a restock would be able to just pretty much take whatever they want, right? And then from there, it morphed into, okay, well, now I'm going to wait. Now I'm going to try and guess the schedule. And now it morphed from there into people waiting literally hours upon hours during a pandemic, nonetheless. Hours upon hours, sometimes 8 hours a day, sometimes multiple days a week. I see it in my own city. And, it never used to be like that. It used to be, so I'll give a good story. Earlier last year, when 2019-20 Prism released, hobby boxes were about $400. And that was insane. Now it's crazy, right? Now it's like, I would buy every box of Prism hobby I can for $400. But back then it was insane because it was a $100 product the year before. So I was like, well, I'm not going to pay that. I just want the base and silver Zions and Jaws. Like, I'd be happy with those. I'm just going to buy this product at retail. And so that's what I was able to do. I was able to drive around in the Pacific Northwest, and I bought all in all about $5,000 worth of retail Prism. That's not paying markup. That was just driving around to stores and just clearing them out because that wasn't a thing a year ago, really. Prism was really the first product that we saw, retail hoarding. And I had said to myself, like, I don't want to pay $400 a hobby box, but instead of that, I can get 20 blasters at that price at $20 each, right? So 20 times, doing some math, 20 times 20. So I'd rather have 20 blasters over one hobby box if I'm just hunting for Jaws and Zions. So I was able to do that. And at that time, I didn't see anybody camping in stores or waiting for vendors. There wasn't the issue that exists today. And then right around Mosaic, the launch of Mosaic basketball, things started to shift. And we started to see lines and we started to see people waiting. And it was always like one or two people. There were never these huge lines that we see now. And so it was like, okay, well, Twitter made fun of them, sure. But then it became a more prevalent problem as every product since Mosaic seems to have this issue. I know people that have claimed that they haven't been able to find retail in literally 9 months, a year. And that timeline makes perfect sense. So this is why this problem exists. It's number one, it starts because of hobby. Because of the price of hobby surged, the price of retail stayed the same. So basic economics at play here. Retail is far more valuable than the price tag of it on the shelf. So recently we've seen Target starting to enforce this limit policy of 3 per item. And then we've also started to see some Walmarts now set limits as well. My local Walmart in the small mountain town that I live in just put up a sign after I've been begging them for months. They just put up a sign saying limit 3 per person. Now, I want to talk specifically about limits. And so with limits, there's basically two kinds. In my opinion, there's two kinds. There's a self-policing limit, and then there's a store policing limit, right? So a store policing limit, to give you an example, would be a store locking up all of the product behind glass or putting it back behind customer service. And this is most effective, and it's going to work great. There are some stores locally to me that do this. There is a Fred Meyer, which is a regional chain here in the Pacific Northwest. It's part of the Meyer and Kroger chain as well. You may have one of those in your city. And this works great when they put it behind glass or they put it back in customer service. But there is also a Fred Meyer local to me that doesn't do that. And they leave all of the products on the shelf with a sign saying limit per day. And this was recent, before it was the Wild Wild West out where I live. There were no limits at Walmart or Fred Meyer. And so with this new limit, it taking place, I walked in on the restock, the first big restock with these signs up on a Friday. And so that's where the thumbnail for this video came from. I walked in on this huge restock. Now, everybody at the store knows me, and they know that I do a YouTube channel, and I've been going to this store literally all my life. So they remember when I was a little run good. And I have a lot of friends. This is a small town. Everybody knows everybody. So I come in, I get my 2 blaster boxes of hoops. I ask, for clarity, can I get 2 of each? No, it's 2 of everything. I take my 2, I leave. I have to go run some errands, including going to the LCS a couple hours later. And so I stopped back in because I had a feeling that because this product was on the shelf and this was a self-policing policy, 2 per, I felt like it wasn't going to work. I felt like somebody was either going to go to self-check with as much as they want, or if there were hard limits on self-check and, it would prevent somebody from buying more than 2, they would just do multiple purchases, or they just go through a grocery line or an electronics line, or maybe not an electronics line, but a grocery line where there are no limits. So I go back 2 hours later to snap a photo, and there's nothing there. All of the blasters, mega boxes, Topps Chrome, and Prism Cello packs are all gone. I expected this, but I didn't expect it in 2 hours. I expected it in 4 hours or 6 hours. I knew that as soon as the self-check in the back of the store where the cards are located closed down, usually around 7 or 8 p.m., that somebody would go back there and wipe it out. Like, I expected that. But what I didn't expect was to come back in 2 hours later and see it all gone. Now, the interesting thing here, you could say, well, maybe just a lot of collectors came in. Maybe it was all just collectors who knew when the restock was. The interesting thing here is that all of the products with secondary market value are gone. The playoff fat packs, or the contenders fat packs were still there. The top series one was there. It was literally as if somebody had recognized every product that had secondary market value and took that. So now you can say, you could look at this picture and say, well, hey, there is still product on the shelf. There's series 1 and contenders. Sure. To an extent, the policy does work, but still doesn't totally work, right? Because I played the game correctly. I took my 2, and then somebody cleared the shelf and took everything they wanted. So the policy does not work when it's self-policing, and that's problematic to me. So I wish that all Walmarts and Targets and all these regional stores, I wish that they would recognize that retail products are they are as valuable as the same video games that they lock up. Video games, $60 each, get locked up behind glass. I think that that's what needs to happen with all sports cards going forward, and probably most gaming cards too, because we have Pokemon, we have Shining Fates, and we're going to have some hotter Pokemon sets coming out. So this is the problem. This is the state of retail currently, is that limits are starting to be enforced at Target and Walmart, but self-policing limits are always going to be problematic to me. People are always going to be able to find a way around these. And so for me, what I would really like to see is Targets and Walmarts literally just put this product behind glass back in the electronics section. This is what I think would be the most effective way to ensure that all collectors can get a little bit of retail. Now, this does mean, products are going to sell out. That's going to happen. But, you shouldn't, even with limits, you shouldn't go in expecting only to find the worst of the worst products. The flippers and the people who want to clear shelves shouldn't be able to win, and they shouldn't be able to take whatever they want, even with these policies in place. And that's what I am seeing early on with these limits being enforced. I'm still seeing, people will find a way. If they want that product, people will find a way to get it out of the store, whether that's repeat trips through self-check, whether that's changing their mask and their hoodie. They're always going to find a way unless you put this product behind glass. So I wanted to come on here. I wanted to talk about the state of retail, what I've seen, what I've experienced. Like I said, there was a time where I would buy out, I would buy out Panini Prism and Panini Optic last year for basketball, because buyouts and retail flipping really wasn't a thing yet to an extent. It's not what we saw now. Back then I never could have imagined it being a problem. I couldn't imagine that behavior of thinking, oh, I'll just buy a lot of retail instead of buy hobby would be problematic. And, I think that a lot of people who had that idea, that's kind of how this got started, with so much money coming into the trading card industry from the outside, whether that's investors, people who flip sneakers, whatever the case may be, whatever they're coming from. I think people realize now there's a lot of money to be made in trading cards, even if it's just retail wax flipping, which, to me, in my opinion, there are 1,000 different ways to make money in this hobby. You can grade cards, you can flip cards, you can speculate on players. To me, the lowest common denominator is, waiting, with unlimited time and the ability to just wait in stores. It's the easy money, and you basically don't have to know very much. Now, you could take some bad products, like some of the Leaf products or Top Series 1, and try and flip those. But, after one mistake, you're going to learn. So I wanted to come on here. I wanted to talk about this just a little bit. I think we've gone a little bit long, so if you're still watching, I appreciate that. But that's going to do it for me today. I'd love to hear your stories. I'd love to hear how limits have worked in your city. If you're able to find product now that stores are starting to put these limits in place, I'd love to hear just your experiences in general with retail, because I think that this is something that is going to continue for a very long time. As long as the market stays hot, as long as hobby continues to have price fixing and just shadiness, and as long as hobby continues to be priced at 7x what it was in prior years, and as long as retail continues to stay the same, I think that we're going to keep seeing this. So I'd really love to hear your thoughts. I'd really love to hear your stories on how you are able to find retail, if you were able to find retail now that these limits are in place. Definitely would love to hear it. That's going to do it for me today. If you're new here, why don't you go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you stay. I do a lot more trading card rips and things like that, and a whole lot less talking in videos like this. But I felt compelled to make this video simply because, this is what we're starting to see. This is what I've experienced, and hopefully it's for the better. But yeah, that's going to do it for me today. Take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time on down the road.